Good afternoon. Here we have Senator John Cornyn with us, and we want to, on behalf of the Vietnamese American community, we'd like to thank you for being here, Senator Cornyn.
It's my honor.
And if you could you give a background of yourself? I know that you have a significant background that we'd all love to hear about.
Well, currently I serve the state of Texas in the United States Senate, and it's an honor to represent 26 million Texans in the United States Senate in a seat that was first held by Sam Houston, the namesake of the city of Houston. That was raised in 1846. But before I was in the Senate, elected in 2002, I was Attorney General of Texas for 4 years. And then before that, I was a judge in the Texas Supreme Court for 7 years. And then before that, I was a district court judge in San Antonio, Texas, which is where my wife and I met and married, where I practiced law before I first ran for office. But for the last almost a little over 11 years now, I've represented the state of Texas in the United States Senate, which is a great privilege and a great honor.
We are very thankful that you're here. I'd like to introduce you to the other panelist members. This is Attorney Shandon Phan.
Good afternoon. Good to see you.
He is the president of the Vietnamese board, community board here. We also have Reverend Dr. Tam Pham. He's a pillar of our community as well, and we'd love to be able to ask you questions that would help you introduce yourself to the Vietnamese American community and the values that are important to our community.
I welcome the opportunity.
I am going to ask you questions about education.
Okay.
I'm also a local attorney and a professor and a parent with a child in public education. And I've read your bio, and I'm sure all of us have read your bio, and very inspired by all the things that you've done in political office. There's a quote that I read, and I found it to be very inspiring, and I'd like to read this to the audience. You stated that a good education system helps strengthen our society by teaching and instructing young adults, giving them a strong foundation that will help them learn and succeed as citizens and individuals. Every child deserves that good start that is best achieved through a first-class education. And I definitely agree with you on that. My first question to you, sir, is how can we improve our schools to make sure our students have the best chance at success?
Well, as you may recall, as a lawyer, I had a lot of experience back on the Texas Supreme Court on dealing with the fair allocation of resources, tax dollars to support public education in Texas. And the concern was, of course, that every young person be able to get access to a first-class education. And we all appreciate the fact that this is the key that unlocks the door to opportunity. And without an education, people will not live up to their potential in life. And no one understands that better than immigrants, because coming to the United States, many people don't speak English as their native language, of course, and so giving access to the immigrant community to good educational opportunity is critical. I think that the United States still has something unique in the world when it comes to the American dream. And if you think about what that consists of, it consists in the opportunity to compete equally, fairly, and to work hard and provide for your family and to reach your potential financially and otherwise. But none of that's going to be possible without access to a good education. Now, the big debates we are having today in public education is what should that consist of? Should it always be preparing people for a 4-year college experience? Truthfully, for many people, you can get good high-paying jobs, for example, in the Houston area, without a 4-year college degree. Maybe you go to a junior college, learn some technical or other skills, and that's a healthy discussion, I think, as to what choices we ought to give parents and children when it comes to education, because I don't believe one size fits all.
And my second question is, how can we make our next generation of Texans, young Texans, have the opportunity to achieve the American dream? And like you stated, higher education is one of those pathways.
It is. Well, there's no substitute for parental involvement. There's no substitute for parents and families in encouraging and disciplining us to study. Studying is not necessarily the most fun thing you get to do as a young person, but it is the most important thing you can do, a discipline that you can acquire and that will pay off in the future. So I think most of us have benefited from strong parents who believe in the benefit of education, who have helped instill that discipline in us.
Absolutely.
And have helped us be successful. So I think parents and families are the most important, but the opportunity to learn on an equal and fair basis is what government should guarantee to every child.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more about the chance of being success. Look around the panel, all three of us who came here as a first generation, and then because of the opportunity here in the United States that we have become success in life. And also parental guidance. I'm sure that without the guidance and the persistence of our parents, that none of us will do where we are right now.
One of the things I worry about in our society generally is you see Vietnamese Americans who are, my impression is, very tight-knit family, that we are missing a lot of that in American society more generally, and I think a lot of our children are suffering as a result of a lack of parental involvement in their lives through no fault of their own, and unfortunately sometimes the consequences are not that positive. So I think we are blessed with those of us who've had two parents who loved us and cared about us and who helped instill in us the discipline and the order that we needed in order to achieve our potential. We're very fortunate indeed to have that.
Absolutely. And education is a significant value in the Vietnamese American community.
Sure.
So it is very inspiring to know that you stand for those values.
Absolutely.
I know that you've voted on key legislation that's supported education for a diverse base of students and helping parents be able to help their children get through school.
Well, one of the most important things is to make sure that the government doesn't try to dictate everything on a cookie cutter or one-size-fits-all basis with a lot of regulation and red tape, and that we support good teachers and
Absolutely.
we encourage good teachers, but that we also preserve parents' choices when it comes to how best to get that education that the children get.
And you're a huge supporter of innovative educational programs, curriculums that help students
Absolutely.
and teachers in that
Absolutely.
system. Wonderful. The other category that we'd like to go ahead and segue into is economy and job creation. And I'll have Mr. Fan and Reverend talk to you about those questions.
Okay. Well, I'm wearing two hats here. One is the Catholic clergy, and I'm a practicing physician in the community, a businessman in the community. So I would like to ask you a question on behalf of many of our business people. Well, it seems like our economy seems to be improving, but what can Congress do to help small businesses thrive and continue to provide opportunity in Texas, particularly more concerned the Vietnamese community and the Vietnamese business people?
Right. Well, sometimes I think the answer is as simple as the government needs to get out of the way, but that's not a complete answer. Obviously, government provides the rule of law that protects small businesses and makes sure that they are not treated differently from big businesses who can hire the lawyers and have the bureaucracy and political clout. But that's one of the things that I think has made America so successful, has been the rule of law, and something I believe in passionately, that no matter how exalted or how powerful you are, the same rules apply to you that apply to the most humble American citizen coming here. So I think that's very important. But obviously we need government at some level, but I think keeping taxes as low as we can, and regulation, common sense, and it helps a lot. Particularly, I know the Vietnamese community have a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yes.
You have people who are small businesses who want to grow into big businesses.
Yeah.
But the problem is with high taxes and over-regulation is many times those can tie up so much of their resources in non-productive ways that it threatens their ability to succeed and then grow. Government needs to provide some essential services, keep the lights on, and keep order and the rule of law in society, provide public education. But I think we need to look to ourselves and look to the small businesses and the entrepreneurs to create the prosperity and opportunity for jobs. That's been our key to our success here in Texas, and we are I like to think, the envy of the rest of the country. Part of that too is we've been very much blessed with abundant natural resources, but we have not been afraid, particularly here in Houston, which is the energy capital not only of the United States but of the world. We've seen our innovation and technology when it comes to taking advantage of our natural resources there create a lot of prosperity with manufacturing moving back onshore because of the low-cost energy supply and feedstock. So there's a lot of things that government can do, but I don't think it should try to do too much because many times it's not flexible and nimble enough, or there will be unintended consequences which actually will suppress or discourage job creation rather than encourage it.
In recent years, our national economy is not doing so well, while Texas is experiencing tremendous growth. We have a lot of people moving to our state every year. What do you think is the key difference between Texas economy versus a national economy? And you mentioned the rule of law, the role of government. So what should government not do in stimulating the economy?
Well, I think there's always a risk when government tries to do too much. And we've seen this, for example, in healthcare reform. We all believe that people should have access to quality healthcare. But the problem is when you try to do too much, sometimes you get the opposite. In other words, rather than bringing down the price of healthcare and making it more accessible, it becomes more expensive or more out of reach. Or people lose their doctor or their hospital that they would prefer, and government begins dictating those choices rather than the individual. But the reason, in Texas, the reason I think people come to Texas is because they sense the can-do spirit and the opportunities that are provided by our economy. And Texans are optimistic by nature, and rather than see a glass half empty, we see a glass half full. And particularly Houston is, to me, one of the most vibrant parts of the Texas economy, and you see such diversity, people voting with their feet, coming from places like California where the jobs are not so plentiful to places where they are. And then also, I mentioned again the energy factor. This has been a real game changer for us. You see what's happening now, for example, in Ukraine and Europe, where Russia controls the energy supplies for much of Europe and the Ukraine, and so it gives Mr. Putin a disproportionate influence on the policy there. We see wars being fought in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. And the problem has been historically is that we've been so dependent on other countries and other regions of the world for our energy supply. Now, thanks to great innovation and investment, we are seeing that North America has the potential to become energy self-sufficient, perhaps by as early as 2020. And in the meantime, that creates a lot of jobs and opportunities from people from all across the income levels.
And along with education in the Vietnamese American community, being a small business owner, a successful small business owner, and with the entrepreneurial spirit, that's another one of our high values as well. And as you were stating, being a small business owner, I'm sure that also Shannon Phan's a small business owner. Vietnamese Americans, we would love to be able to be appreciated for the fact that we are part of the backbone of the economy here in Texas, like you were stating. So,
well, 70% of the new jobs are being created not by the Fortune 500 companies, it's by the mom and pop small businesses who create those. And so what we need to continue to do is to make sure that we nurture and encourage those small businesses, because those are the future to job creation, and not do things that maybe sound like a good idea but end up having a backfiring or negative impact on those small businesses.
and it all contributes towards living the American dream.
Absolutely.
The next subject we'd like to segue into is immigration and citizenship. And I know that Reverend Doctor, you can go ahead and start with your first question.
Sure. I'll ask the first question. Well, recently there has been an influx of women and children, and also men, from Central America and Mexico to come to our south border. Many people have felt sympathy for those people and push for legal immigration status for those people. But at the same time, there's many people who has been waiting
Right.
for the immigration status to come here to reunion with their family. They had gone through a regular route. So for many people, they felt that it's not fair for them instead of for those people to go shortcut. So my question is, what is going on with the immigration reform? And why are we failing to get a solution for it? And another question is, are we treating everyone in a fair and equal way?
Right. Well, I appreciate your question because it recognizes that this is more complicated than most people acknowledge. There are a lot of people who have opinions in this area, but frequently they are very narrow and don't take into account the complexity of this. And to start with these children who are coming in from Central America, you'd have to have a pretty hard heart not to feel compassion and sympathy for them. But then the deeper you dig into that, you realize that that they've come on a horrible or horrific journey from Central America through South America in the hands of human smugglers and cartels who treat them like a commodity, like drugs, weapons. They treat people, they traffic in children and women. 6 out of 10 women who come up from Central America are sexually assaulted en route. They're kidnapped, held for ransom. It's a horrible situation. So I say that to say that while we all feel compassion, the status quo is not compassionate. It enriches corrupt organizations that benefit from the gaps or the loopholes in our current immigration law. So I personally favor immigration reform. I think we need to be what we always have been, a welcoming country to people who want to come to the United States. But I feel very strongly that we must maintain the rule of law and that we should not relinquish control of the system to criminals and these cartels who exploit people. And some people, I think, when they look at these children, for example, they think, well, certainly we feel compassion to them, but they are not benefiting in the long term from a system that's run by criminal organizations. That's why it's important that Congress work together, hopefully with the president. It's been tough, but we shouldn't give up. And then we need to reward people who do play by the rules, and we need to unify families. We need to look at what's in the best interest of the United States. For example, we know that many Vietnamese Americans and other immigrants are very highly educated and have a lot of benefit that they can confer on the United States in terms of creating jobs here and competing in a global economy. So it is complicated, but we can't use that as an excuse to do nothing, because doing nothing keeps us in the control of criminals and does not benefit the immigrants in the long run.
Mr. Phan, your question?
Sir, every year, just like the state of Texas, the Vietnamese community here in Houston is also growing tremendously. We have many people moving here from California, other states, and every month, every year, we have thousands of newcomers swearing in to be new American citizens. So it's a statement who has served the state of Texas for most of your entire life. What would be your message to those new citizens?
Well, my message is welcome and congratulations. One of the most uplifting and positive experiences I've had as a United States Senator and just as an American citizen is to go to these immigration and naturalization ceremonies. They are always happy. It's almost like an adoption or a birth of welcoming a new child into a family, because it opens up limitless opportunities for these new immigrants who have been awarded American citizenship. And America continues to be the most generous country in the world when it comes to naturalizing new American citizens. It's been up to 1 million people a year. I think it ranges between 800,000 and 1 million a year now. So we recognize the benefits that immigrants bring to the United States, to our economy, to our culture, to our way of life. And of course, America is unique not because we all look the same and act the same and come from the same place. It's because we all come here because of our ideals, the belief in freedom, the dignity of human life and of the individual, and that belief that anybody if they work hard enough, if they sacrifice enough, they can be successful
Absolutely.
and achieve their dream. That's what continues to attract immigrants and what we need to preserve. So those are very happy occasions, and I always enjoy going to naturalization ceremonies.
And the growing diversity of our country adds to the strength of our country. overall.
Absolutely. You mentioned people moving from California.
Yes.
I like to think that people are moving from California because they don't get it. They get things wrong in terms of taxes and regulation. We get things right, so they vote with their feet.
Yes, very
But
true.
Texas and Houston is increasingly a diverse
Very diverse.
place, which is one reason why I was so grateful to be able to come here today and to
Well, we are
introduce
honored.
myself to some of your audience and to connect with many of my Vietnamese American friends and to talk about those common shared values which make us Americans.
Well, this show will be viewed by many people from different states. So we want to say that Texas is a place to be, right?
It doesn't get any better than Texas.
And Senator Cornyn, as you see, the studio is located here in the International District.
Right.
It's, you know, it's the
Exactly.
melting pot, if not, it's just this wide myriad groups, different walks of life,
Right.
from one end of Bel Air to another. And we're very proud of this district. It's one of our jewel districts in the city.
Well, you
So,
should be proud. It's very, very impressive.
Thank you. The next subject is going to be about foreign affairs. And Mr. Fan and Reverend Dr. will also ask you questions.
Well, today we discussed many local issues, but in fact, before today, we have known you for many years, knowing your support and leadership on human rights for Vietnam. And today, so let's go back a little bit because we have many Vietnamese Americans who still care strongly about their homeland
Sure.
and the future of democracy in that region. There has been escalating conflict between China, Vietnam, the Philippines, Japan. What do you think of America's asserting our role, continual leadership in that region? And how should the U.S. deal with growing challenge in Southeast Asia Sea?
Well, I was happy to hear President Obama talk about his pivot to Asia, and I thought that offered promise. The difficulty is that in foreign affairs, you have to more than talk about things, you actually have to do things. But I think recognizing the important economic relationships, particularly as trading partners with Vietnam, with China, with other countries in the region, in Asia, that there is mutual benefit to be derived from it. But there's also, I think, leverage in the human rights area, something that, and religious freedoms area that we all care so much about and which is being denied many people in Vietnam today as a result of the communist government still in power. So I think we have to not only say the right things, we have to do the right things. And some of that requires tough negotiation. If the impression is that the United States is somehow in retreat and we're pulling back from the world, then unfortunately that creates a void into which some bad actors will be more than happy to fill that void. And we've seen that in everywhere from Ukraine to Iraq and Syria. We see it over in Asia, particularly as China begins to be more aggressive. And that creates an instability and danger. So I think we need to be tough. We need to be clear. We need to do more than talk, and our actions need to follow our words when it comes to negotiating with our trading partners and preserving and protecting the values that we share as Vietnamese Americans and other Americans here, and to make sure that we don't sacrifice those in the interests of a quick deal.
Yes. Reverend?
Yeah, I think your answer touched exactly on my next question. But before posing my next question on foreign affairs, because many audience may not know, but he has been a champion for improving human rights and religious freedom in Vietnam. Thank you very much, Senator.
It's my honor.
He introduced the bill, Vietnam Human Rights Sanction Act, in the Senate way back in 2010. And Senator Cornyn has drafted many letters to request for release of many political prisoners, sent them to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to Vietnam Prime Minister Nguyen Tấn Dũng, to President Obama before the meeting with the Vietnam President Tri Tấn Sang also. And recently he co-sponsored SR 412, requesting China to remove oil rig from South China Sea and reaffirm U.S. interest in freedom of navigation of sea and airspace. So thank you very much for everything that you have done for our Vietnamese community here. Yeah.
Well, I've benefited a lot from my interactions with the Vietnamese community here, and it's given me a chance to learn more about these issues and what I might do as your representative to
Thank you
raise the
very much.
visibility and give voice to those issues in Washington, D.C. So I've benefited a lot from that collaboration. Thank you.
So we're proud to have a great friend in the Senate.
You do.
My question for you is, what are your views regarding current U.S.-Vietnam relations? While you sponsor S-929, the Vietnamese Human Rights Sanction Act, would impose sanction against individual who complicit in human rights violation and religious freedom in Vietnam. So you think it has a chance to pass the Senate this time around? And do you think President Obama would support it? And if not, if it doesn't pass this time, what would you recommend our Vietnamese American community in the United States continue to do?
Well, I know the Vietnamese American communities are dispersed widely across the United States, and I've encouraged many of my colleagues who come from states where there's concentration of Vietnamese Americans to do what I've done and to reach out and to connect with those communities and to learn what they might do to help represent their concerns in the Senate. So we always can use more help and more votes. As you noted, we've introduced legislation, but it hasn't passed yet into law. My hope would be that after this next election, depending on the outcome of the election, that we'd be in a stronger position to place legislation on President Obama's desk calling for additional sanctions and still preserving the authority that the president would have to waive those sanctions if it was in the national interest to do so, but to use that increased leverage and influence for positive outcomes with regard to human rights. We know that the United States government has imposed sanctions on Russia for its aggression in Ukraine and Crimea, and we know that there's been a lot of discussion with the government of Iran over their desire to have a nuclear weapon. And I think there is a willingness, certainly on my part and on Congress's part, to use the economic leverage that we have through sanctions to help influence improvement in behavior. And I think also together with the trade agreements that Vietnam would certainly like us to engage in, we shouldn't just extend a carrot, we ought to have a stick that goes along with that and try to use that to modify bad behavior.
Absolutely. Senator Cornyn, we have members of the audience that would have some certain questions for you.
Great.
If we could, we'd start with the first member who would like to ask their first question.
Dr. Tron?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, Senator Cornyn, for being here. And I would like to ask you regarding to the healthcare reform, the Obamacare, why Texas is not joining into receiving funds from the government, which would help to keep more affordable. People could get help to sign up for the Obamacare, if you quote unquote. And my second question is, as a Republican whip, how could you help to, because as Reverend Phan had mentioned, the Vietnam Human Rights Act had been passed the House 4 times, and this time it's been the 5th time, and is still not able to pass through the Foreign Affairs in the Senate since March that we came to Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate your questions about health care, because it seems to me that the effort has backfired to a large extent when the biggest problem is affordability. To make it more expensive seems to me to be the wrong approach. We ought to preserve the decisions for patients and consultation with their doctor, and we ought to find a way to make it less costly, not more costly, because that makes it harder for more people to get the health coverage they need. But your question about what might happen if we have new management, new leadership in Washington, D.C. and the Senate, I make no secret of the fact that I've been in the minority and I've been in the majority, and being in the majority is a lot better. And my hope would be after this election that Republicans would be given a chance to be in the majority again, and which would mean that I likely would be the majority whip, which is part of the Republican leadership in the Senate. So much of the legislation that, for example, the human rights legislation you mentioned has passed the House, but it's never been taken up in the Senate. And what we need to do is make sure that it's scheduled for a vote as early as we can in the next year, and that we get it passed out of the Senate, which I believe we could if we've given an opportunity for a vote. And I believe with new leadership, we can make that commitment to you that we will have that vote, and then present it to the president for his signature. Right now, it's passed the House and it's died in the Senate for lack of action, and we need to change that, and I think we can after November.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Yeah. I think there aren't any more questions. Thank you for your question. And I wanted to, again, thank you for being part of our panel. We are deeply appreciated by the fact that you support our ideals of the American dream. Better education for our students, easier access to higher education for students, job opportunity, global economy that will create more competitive, skilled workforce, and of course, a strong voice in the Senate in regards to issues on immigration and foreign affairs.
Well, thank you. It's my honor to be here with you, and look forward to our continuing collaboration and working together with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good to be with you again.
Thank you.
Good to be with you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Good
so
to
much.
see you again. Thank
Wonderful
you.
to see you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Beautiful day.